let's take a moment and consider this inequality. -3 is less than 6. I want to start by adding 3 to both sides. So -3 plus 3 is 0, 6 plus 3 is 9, and we see that 0 is less than 9. Let's subtract 4 from both sides. 0 subtract 4, 9 subtract 4, and -4 is less than 5. We can multiply both sides by 4. -4 times 4, 20 times 4, and we see that -16 is less than 20. We can divide by 2. -16 divided by 2, 20 divided by 2, and we see that -8 is less than 10. We added, subtracted, multiplied, and divided, and the sign did not change. Let's keep going. Multiply by -3. -8 times -3, 10 times -3. 24 is greater than -30. Let's divide by -6. 24 divided by -6 is -4. -30 divided by -6 is +5. Do you notice what happened here? The sign changed direction when I multiplied by -3 and when I divided by -6. We could add a positive number. We could subtract a positive number. We could multiply a positive number, divide by a positive number. The signs didn't change. But when we multiplied and divided by a negative, the signs changed. This is very important to remember. The sign changed direction when we multiplied or divided by a negative number. I would say the leading mistake that people make when they're solving inequalities is that they forget this fact about how an inequality symbol works. So if this is something that's a little bit new to you or something that you're not really familiar with, I would write that down, stick it up on your bathroom mirror, and stare at it while you brush your teeth. Because we want to practice solving inequalities. Basically, inequalities are solved in the same way as we solve equations. However, if you multiply or divide by a negative number, the sign changes direction. Not when you add or subtract, not when you multiply or divide with a positive number, but if you multiply or divide with a negative number, that's when the sign changes direction. So for example, -4x equals 20. Here, we're dividing both sides by -4. Oops, I didn't want to put an equal sign in the middle there. We're solving an inequality. -4x is less than 20. When I divide both sides by -4, the sign has to change direction. In this case, I want to get rid of that -3. So I'm going to multiply both sides by -3. These divide out along with the negative sign. And the sign changes direction. Be careful Make sure you remember that important idea. So we're going to solve each of these inequalities. We're going to graph our solution on a number line and write our answer in interval notation. So remember that first step for solving an inequality, for solving an equation? Simplify each side. So we're going to use the distributive property. When I'm solving an inequality, I prefer x on the left, but let's solve it this time with x on the right. So we have 16 is greater than 2x. Now I can divide both sides by 2. And we see that 8 is greater than x. But remember, for putting this on a number line, it's easier if x is on the left. That means the sign has to change as well. I see that x is less than 8. So I'm going to shade towards negative infinity. And for my answer in interval notation, I'm going to use the endpoints. Oh, I didn't put my bracket on for 8. Less than, it's going to be open or round. Both of these are round. Pause your video and try question 2. Did you remember to change the direction of your sign? And of course, we can simplify that fraction. X is greater than or equal to 1/4. So on a number line, shading towards positive infinity, greater than or equals means it's square. For interval notation, we're using our endpoints in order. Infinity is always round, but in this case, we need a square bracket for 1/4. Pause your video, try the next 2. Did you remember to simplify each side? Again, if I was checking your work on a test, or if you were verifying your test with me, I want to see that where both sides are simplified. Remember, when we're subtracting, that doesn't change the direction of the sign. But when we divide by -3, it does change the direction. X is greater than 3, so we're shading towards positive infinity with a round or open bracket. And for interval notation, we're using those endpoints in the order they appear. If you haven't completed question 4, pause your video and do so now. We have fractions, so we can multiply by the lowest common multiple of our denominator. Because remember, we are just solving this like we solve equations. We just have an inequality symbol in the middle instead. Eight divides by 8, 8 divides by 4. So I'm looking for 3x minus 16 is great. That doesn't look like a 16, does it? Is greater than or equal to 10x plus 8. Mm, 24. Divide both sides by -7. The sign changes direction. So on a number line, -24/7, x is less than. We're shading towards -infinity. We need a square bracket because x is less than or equal to. We use our endpoints in the order that they appear for our interval notation. Infinity is always round, and this time square for -24/7. We will leave graphing until the next lecture.